right, let's bring in Dregs this morning. Darren Dreger, as you guys are sitting there and you're working through trade deadline on Friday, what was the move that kind of got the most buzz going at the on the set there?
Oh, that's a good question. As the day developed, it was interesting, right? Like right out of the gate, we're all focused on the saga that was Mikko Rantanen and everything that went into that contract extension with the Dallas Stars, and the deal is on, the deal is off, and all of those things. Yeah, I'm trying to think, like Brad Marchand getting, ultimately getting traded.
Right up there, right? Like right at the end.
Yeah, and it's kind of what you learn after the fact, because in the moment, the information is loose, and I think that's the best way to describe it, because you're of course looking for all the details that you can gather as part of the coverage, but first and foremost, you just want to connect a player to the team that he's going to. So when you learn that Brad Marchand is going to the Florida Panthers, like, ooh, geez, I didn't see that coming. The idea of Marchand getting traded wasn't surprising. And now after the fact, you wonder how that all came down. And, there's all kinds of theories. Marchand is hurt first and foremost. So, but how hurt is he? And was it possible that maybe he kind of delivered the message to Boston after a failed contract negotiation, by the way. And that has more to do with what the Boston Bruins are willing to invest in their longtime leader and captain than it does Marchand playing hardball. I think we can all appreciate, when teams have to make calls on experienced players like that, it's a tough business decision. But in this case, the sense is that maybe Marchand said, okay, well, I'm dinged up here. Maybe I'm not playing this year. It's that simple. Or if you feel like you want to recoup some assets here, because I am a pending unrestricted free agent, here's the team that I want to play for. And he ends up shockingly in Florida. So that one was a bit of a surprise. The Brandon Carlo trade, Edmonton benefits from, what appears to be more of a rebuild and a retool in Boston. Brandon Carlo to the rival Toronto Maple Leafs, surprising, not shocking, but surprising. All in all, fellas, it was a real entertaining day. Not necessarily because of the volume of trades, but again, just the significance of some of these deals, starting first thing in the morning with Mikko Rantanen. And then prior to that, you had Brock Nelson going to the Colorado Avalanche, but then that really hit Winnipeg between the eyes, and to an extent, Toronto, because both those teams were negotiating on Nelson as well. So there were just all kinds of different twists and turns.
Well, and the Dylan Cousins deal, like a good hockey deal with some young guys being moved. I loved that trade as well. So yeah, there was a lot to get to, and there's a bunch of Rantanen fallout here. Dallas ends up getting him. I actually thought Carolina did pretty good recouping. Some pretty good assets. Stankoven scores a game winner in his debut. Like I thought they came out of it okay for what was obviously a very awkward and unique situation.
Agreed. And look, I'm sure there are Hurricane supporters that are like, well, yeah, but you didn't fix the now. And Logan Stankoven, to a point, is a big part of the now. And I can tell you guys, you look at the hockey DB of Logan Stankoven, this one would have been a difficult trade for Tom Gillardi, the owner of the Dallas Stars, to make. He loves Stankoven. Why? Because Logan Stankoven was such a big piece of the Kamloops Blazers, right? And Tom Gillardi also owns the Kamloops Blazers. And, in some respects, the Blazers might be his first love, and then Dallas is, it's part of his hockey love, but just, a bigger asset, obviously. So you factor in all of the decisions that had to be made going into that trade. And then ultimately, and this was a curious one, and social media kind of took it out of context, because, there was some reporting that said, well, the deal is done. Now they just have to work out a contract extension. Well, yeah, that's factual, but the deal isn't done until the contract extension is negotiated. That was a condition of the trade. So we got reporting deeply on this first thing Friday morning, and the message from the player side was, hey, there's no deal here. We're not close on a negotiation on this extension. And then the Dallas Stars weigh in as we're on the air, and I knew that the Dallas Stars had drawn the line at $12 million. And I knew that Mikko Rantanen wanted $13 million. Well, that may not seem like a significant amount, $1 million, but you multiply that times $8 million is a big package, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So inevitably, why did it get done? Because Mikko Rantanen wanted to play for the Dallas Stars. He's got clearly as friends there. There's a collection of Finnish players. He's really tight with Rupe Hintz, Miro Heiskanen, Lindell. I mean, go down the list. Granlund, who they recently acquired, and all of that. But the aftermath is what's more intriguing. And I mean, I don't know how deep you want me to get into the weeds on any of this, but Toronto was there. As Ryan Rishaug reported, the Edmonton Oilers were among many teams. Do I think that Rantanen was interested in going to Edmonton and most of the other teams reported? No. I mean, he wanted to go to the team that he ended up on, and that's the Dallas Stars. But you do have to give credit to Stan Bowman and every manager who tried to throw the hat into the ring, because a player of this significance, a world-class Stanley Cup champion who plays the game the right way, these guys don't come along very often. So you definitely have to explore every possibility to see if there's a fit. And I think that's what Edmonton and most of these teams did.
Darren, looking around the Pacific as well, and just your thoughts, I mean, Vegas bringing back Riley Smith, Kuzmenko going to the Kings. What kind of letter grade or how would you go about, saying that the Oilers address their needs as well in relation to what Vegas maybe did or didn't do in the end? And then the Kings also, like, where does Edmonton kind of fit? Are you happy with how they've kind of went about their business as opposed to the other teams, around them in the division?
Well, the critics are always going to say they should have done more. But
isn't it possible to kind of like what they did, but also, I wish they would have got one more piece.
Of course.
Yeah,
absolutely. But you do have to have a dance partner, right? And the pieces do have to fit both financially and otherwise. And in saying that, Edmonton is a top contending team, undoubtedly. Well, if you're getting into the bigger sweepstakes and, name that player, whoever that player is, maybe it costs you a roster piece that you just don't want to have to give up, or you don't think you can afford to give up because it weakens you in another area. I mean, that's ultimately what comes down in the full scale consideration of any sort of trade. But when I look, the only power shift I see in the West goes to Colorado. And then because the Dallas Stars acquired Rantanen, but before that, Cody Ceci and Mikael Granlund. I mean, you can't overlook the body of the work here. So Dallas is a much better team. They are, and so is Colorado. I mean, Colorado hit it out of the park for me. With Nelson and Charlie Coyle, bringing in Lindgren, and then rewind to what they did in goal. Their goaltending was in shambles at the start of the year, and they addressed it.
They've changed 50% of their lineup during the season.
I mean, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's wild, the work that they've been able to do. And I'm always reminded, we've got GM meetings coming up next week in Florida. And every year, the managers say the same thing at these meetings, and then they say the same thing at the draft. You better like the team that you go into the start of the season with, because it's so difficult to change that team. Well, yeah, I appreciate that, but it's not impossible. And we just watched the Colorado Avalanche turn from a pretty good team to now a top contending team in the West. But I wouldn't dismiss Vegas. I put Vegas on the same realm as Colorado, Dallas, and Edmonton. I do. Every team still has a question mark. LA is a little bit behind them, but not a whole lot behind them. And then there's honorable mention that you can hand over to a number of teams. And I'm not skipping past the Winnipeg Jets.
I was going to ask you, they've had such a good season, and Dallas and Colorado make pretty significant adds. And Winnipeg didn't sit there. They brought in Shannon Tanev, some veteran guys. But I know they wanted a little bit more there with the fan base.
They wanted Brock Nelson as a number 2 center. That's what they wanted. But there's a side story there. So on Thursday, Shoveldayoff and Brad Terliving are both still dealing with the New York Islanders, and they both wanted Brock Nelson. Perfect fit in Winnipeg as their 2C. And, they were talking parameters. I mean, there were offers on the table and pieces were being negotiated on. And then my understanding is the Islanders called and said, Brock doesn't want to play in Canada. Well, that's in part correct, but not entirely correct. So my understanding is that Brock made it clear, because he had no trade protection, Colorado was his first choice. He wanted to go to Colorado, but said, if you can't get the best deal, can't make Colorado work, then let me know and I'll consider other options. And for sure, he would have played in Toronto. And yes, absolutely would have gone to Winnipeg as a rental. But Winnipeg invested a lot of time in that negotiation. Now, they then had to cut bait. And I don't think people realize this, because Edmonton isn't in this anymore. You guys remember the day when our players wouldn't waive their no trades to go to Edmonton. Well, then Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl happened, and now it's far less of an issue. There are guys with no trade protection in the National Hockey League of 6 teams or less, and Winnipeg is on their list of no trade. So
they just have to deal with that, right? Like they have to fight through that. That's
no choice. You either.
But
it does suck, and you either have to overpay for the team to try and convince that player, or you overpay in free agency to convince that player that Winnipeg is the right spot. So now you look at what Winnipeg does end up with. They get a real competitive player, a guy they're familiar with, and Brandon Tanev, and had to circle back because they also thought that they were getting Luke Schenn from the Nashville Predators. Winnipeg thought they were getting him. Then all of a sudden, poof, he ends up in Pittsburgh. And Winnipeg say, what just happened here?
Like,
So probably had to overpay to pull Luke out of Pittsburgh. So I think Winnipeg got better. But so I would put Winnipeg in that same vein as the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah, they got deeper and they improved in an area, but not out of the ballpark like maybe Colorado or Dallas.
Dregs, as always, man, excellent recap. Good work on Friday. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll chat next Monday.
Okay, guys, have a good one.
There you go. That is Darren Dreger joining us at here on the Nielsen Show, brought to you by Pro-Am Sports.